How's it going, everybody? My name is Caleb McDowell. I am the Microsoft evangelist, essentially, over at Armor. There's not many things at Armor that I don't touch when it comes to Microsoft. I kind of lend my experience. Oh, there's an echo. Sorry, I'm gonna mute you, Bobby. I lend my experience where it's needed, right? Any aspect of the business that I can help enhance, kind of come in and just give my 2 cents and see where I can kind of be of use. So, Armor and security. Yeah, we can move forward. So securing Azure, right? The first step to securing Azure is data points, right? Data is the new frontier. We all know that before it used to be having security tools that were set in place across various platforms to try and make sure that you're protected in different areas. That's kind of going now from where it used to be kind of the standard. To begin, right? Sentinel. This is kind of why we're here, what we do best. Sentinel it's not new anymore, but it's changing so often that being on top of it feels as if it's new. So just kind of a slight breakdown of Sentinel. Sentinel is a scalable cloud native solution. It takes pieces from two of the best possibilities of a SIEM, right? So you have security, information, and event management, which allows for you to utilize the data in multiple facets. That comes in compliance. Get that. That comes in the form of compliance, incident response, behavior analytics, threat intelligence and event correlation, data storage, advanced threat detections, log management, and correlation of data. What that all means basically is whenever your data comes into Sentinel, what do you do with it, right? Where does it go? It can just sit there, which for some use cases, that's kind of what you need it for, right? Compliance purposes, storing data up to 10 years if it's financial, things like that. But the real magic happens in what you can do with the data, transitioning it from being just data points to now being analytic rules, applying to compliance frameworks, being able to depict a broader picture of what's happening in your environment. A SIEM typically pulls information from various sources, and then from there kind of tries to build a topology, a topographic map of your environment, right? You see, endpoint over here, your network over the whole thing. You have, servers over here. As you start to add more to the SIEM, it actually depicts that big web of what your environment looks like, which leads me to the next part, SOAR. So security, orchestration, automation, and response. This means that now that you have all these data points in, what can we do with it, right? The goal of IT, I understand as it is now, is to try and remove as many manual hands on keyboard as possible. You want to be able to take this data and say, hey, if X, then Y, right? If you see this, if this happens, if this is there, or if this is going there, you want to be able to take action prior to that getting there, going there, or doing something from a security perspective. So the SOAR capabilities in Microsoft often lead through Sentinel. They either start there, they're in there, and leverage this thing called logic apps, which is a function outside of Sentinel that allows for you to take the data or take the if statement, essentially, right? If this happens, do these next set of steps, afterwards. So SOAR capabilities are only limited by the amount of information that you have in Sentinel itself. So the two components of Sentinel being SIEM and SOAR, it is a bit daunting sometimes when you first look at it because it is so much that you can do with it. But that's kind of, that's where Armor comes in. That's where we come in to try and help you to understand it, build it, and be enterprise ready as soon as possible, which leads me to my next point, Armor Sentinel enrichment. So by leveraging automation, or it's still on the same slide. Right. So by leveraging automation, Armor is able to deploy an environment that is enterprise ready, pretty much out of the box for you, right? If you're just now adopting cloud, you're just now getting to a point where you're actually sending information to your cloud or utilizing its capabilities as a SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, however you're using it. Armor does its best to make sure that you have a good baseline when you get there. It's called a landing zone, right? So being able to land on a security platform that is this rich in capabilities with the data that you already currently have from your previous escapades and adventures in security is monumental. When Sentinel first came out, I was working with it, and the biggest hurdle that most people tried to get over as soon as possible is saying, at what point is our environment Sentinel ready, or when is Sentinel ready for our environment? Armor has solved this issue, right? Through automation, we deploy an entirely scalable with your environment, as well as analytic rules, a few custom data connectors, which is a whole hurdle in itself, and allows for you to come in and say, okay, we are ready for this. We are ready to pull everything in and actually leverage this platform now to be our source of truth. Now, after it's ready and after everything's in there and it's populated and it's actually gaining value by pushing the data there, this is where our SOC services come in. Now, our SOC is truly one that I haven't seen very often. Everyone in this division is skilled up, they're ready to go, and they understand security at such a granular level that I'm sure that if Sentinel wasn't around, they would be running their own SOC divisions, right? They'd be able to go in and actually say, hey, how do we paint a picture to somebody who might not be as technical and explain to them exactly what's going on, what they need to do next, and how we can take steps to prevent. So our SOC, filled with just amazing security professionals, not only does this for you, but this is 24/7. So at any point in the day, any point in time, you're not just getting the ability to say, okay, someone is telling me that this happened in my environment. Now it's, what do we do next? And then the next step is, what do we do to stop this next time? And then from there, it's how do we make sure that anything adjacent to what's happened can now be, stopped, analyzed, put into an automation, perspective, and say, how do we make sure that if this goes here and this does this, right? If X happens and Y happens, how do we make sure that Z is the next step taken before anybody even sees anything, right? That real-time management of your data, as well as that real-time protection of your data. So with these three things combined, you have the actual tool itself. You have the ability for us to come in and make this tool something greater than what it is out of the box, right? Which most of the time takes months, if not a year or so, for a company to hire the necessary, people, get the skill up and expertise there, and then through change management and everything like that, test and figure out exactly what needs to be where, right? That's almost shrunken down to a month to 2 months, depending on how custom you would like it. And then you have a SOC service that instead of hiring a SOC or getting security professionals to be awake 24/7, I've been on call before. We all know that is terrible. Now you have a team of security professionals that at their own expense could, be SOC leaders in their own right, watching at all times. So Armor and Azure Security, again, starts and ends with Sentinel, but in between is such a massive skyscraper of things that are done that, that's a great way to start. So next part. Okay, so what is Microsoft Sentinel security impact? This is a loaded question, but also a loaded answer that we're going to get out of this, and I'm going to try and shrink it down to make the most sense because a little bit of a time. So with Sentinel and with any SIEM really, the goal is to grab all of your separate security stack, right? Put it in one place so that your security team doesn't need to go or know exactly how to use every single tool. Typical architectures of a security team or IT infrastructure would be, okay, you have guys on the network side, you have women on the on the analytic GRC side, you have they them on the SOC side, you have everybody everywhere, right? Now what you can do is you can have security professionals sitting directly in the middle of everything and have everything come to Sentinel, so that instead of having to have security professionals in each aspect of it who own just one thing, now you have someone who understands the umbrella security of your environment and can say, okay, I don't need to know this tool, but I understand the data that's coming from it, and we can do something with it, right? We can detect, we can investigate, create this giant web of where the attack started, where it's trying to go, what it tried to go to next but was stopped, and how do we make sure we create new indicators of compromise for this type of behavior. In terms of response, logic apps, the automation that comes a part of that says, hey, now that we know that this is going to happen, now that we know that these things are going to take place, how do we make sure that this user account has to MFA again, or the data that they tried to pull from SharePoint can't be pulled, but everyone is alerted that that attempt happened, who it happened by, where it happened from, what was their IP address, everything in that scope, and then the threat hunting capabilities, which is around KQL, right? KQL is the Microsoft specific querying language that it's extremely robust, right? You can create graphs, you can get data and kind of put it to its most granular aspect and say, hey, we need to know this very specific thing that happened in our environment. Like someone on a Tuesday in Nicaragua, open up this application. We need to know every single time that happens. You can get all the way down to that level by making sure that all of your data points are within Sentinel, and you have the analytic rules to trigger that. The biggest security impact of Sentinel, I'm sorry, is that it protects your entire digital real estate. And when we say that, it's not pieces of your digital real estate, it's your entire aspect, right? The best approach is to be holistic in your viewpoint of Microsoft security, right? So using 365, Defender for Cloud, Sentinel, all of these things. But it's understandable that most security professionals don't put all their eggs in one basket. That's probably one of the first rules you learn in security, right? Don't ever trust one single thing to do everything for you. You have to almost go at it with a scrutiny, making sure that it's vetted, the risk is there, everything possible. But in this aspect, you don't have to have all Microsoft tools. With Sentinel and its capabilities, it truly is, in my opinion, the best SIEM SOAR platform out there right now, based off of its scalability, cost, as well as its ability to function in ways that I'm sure even most security professionals haven't even discovered yet, which can lead to the next slide. Okay, so Sentinel in your digital real estate, right? The biggest aspect of your digital real estate, again, is having visibility, being able to see everything, right? Now, this does require a level of buy-in, right? You have to be willing to send your information to Sentinel, but that's just the name of the game when it comes to security, right? You have to put your security in the hands of the tools that you're bound by. With Sentinel, you can take the security of the tools that you love most, put them in one place, and allow for the data that's around your environment to be fully visible, right? It's a single pane of glass, essentially. Being able to create dashboards, being able to create workbooks, the automation, analytics. Workbooks are just a visualization of your data. But being able to integrate all of these security logs, even if they are not native to Sentinel, is protecting your security, your digital real estate, right? One thing that Armor does really well, actually, is that in Sentinel, there are, again, as I spoke earlier, native data connectors. This means that Sentinel's already figured out how to parse the data, how to absorb the data, how to send it in. But a good bit of security tools actually aren't in Sentinel. So what Armor has solved, what we figured out, is now how do we get this information into Sentinel, and how do we do it in a way that's ingestible to the human eye? Just a regular Joe can come in and say, okay, this makes sense. That's what's happening, right? Someone who's not a security professional. This requires an extensive amount of work upfront, right, from our side. Luckily, we've solved for it and we've automated it. But typically, this requires, an instance of compute somewhere outside of Sentinel. That can be, a VM in Azure, AWS, whatever, however you want to do it. The data flows to there. It's then managed, rotated, and stored. And afterwards, it's parsed to be readable by Sentinel. That requires sometimes Python, Jupyter notebooks, however that's kind of the secret sauce of Armor. So I'm not going to give that away. But that's the hard part, right? Being able to grab data that's not native to Sentinel and putting it into Sentinel now and making it actionable. So in terms of your digital real estate, there's not many data connectors that we can't create, as well as aren't already native to Sentinel. So being able to enrich that and increase the protection of your security stack is the name of the game here. That's exactly what we're trying to do the best we can. As well as the visualization. I know on numerous occasions I've been approached by someone who's not technical and asked a question that to a technical person would seem very simple, right? But they require more of a picture, like a picture book, instead of detailed words explaining something that happened. And within Sentinel, that's where the workbooks come in. You're able to take the data, visualize it into a pie graph, pie chart, however you want to do it, and it makes it digestible by everybody, right? It's something that can be translated to, C-suite all the way down to your most technical person. And oftentimes those two people can't really speak together, right? Or to each other, because it's just a different school of thought. So being able to not only bring your data in, but make it understandable, readable by everybody is truly where the power lies in Sentinel. It's communication, it's visibility, it's the ability to see and act on almost everything you see. Go to the next one. Right. So in terms of a holistic approach, I can without a doubt say that that is the best way to go with Microsoft. These three options here, you have Sentinel, which is what we've been speaking about, Defender, which Henson Group will speak about here shortly, and then we have Defender for Cloud, which is a little bit outside of the scope of this webinar, but it's still within the scope of what both organizations are going to do, right? So pulling in your secure score, your data from Defender for Cloud to Sentinel is one piece, right? That means that your Azure posture, as well as your servers, your Kubernetes stack, your DNS, your APIs, things like that. That's what Defender for Cloud protects. For the actual setup and sending to Sentinel, that happens with Armor. As far as the Defender for servers and aspect there, that happens within Henson. But being able to take this cycle, put it all together, it creates a symphony of your security stack within Microsoft and allows for the data that is native to Microsoft to flow freely. And automation just becomes, it goes skyrockets. It's through the roof. Now that it's actually all native, you can really do anything you want. It's your imagination is your limit at this point. So being able to, reduce cost, because we all know that it gets extremely expensive whenever you have your money in multiple places, and it's hard to tell which tools overlap in their capabilities. So huge return of investment, right? Time to detect threats, time to respond to threats. This is also reduced whenever you have a holistic approach, because again, the data is all in one place. It's all in one tenant. It's all within the same ecosystem of security. And being able to actually take this data and this information and have it flow seamlessly across is the biggest benefit to being holistic in your approach to Microsoft security. And then onboarding security professionals, again, once the heavy lifting is already done in automation from the Armor side on Sentinel, the deployment from the Henson Group, and then the understanding and knowledge-based transfer that comes along with both of those deployments, it's more about teaching them how to use these tools rather than teaching them how to build. And that's completely, those are two things that, it's apples and oranges at that point. Learning how to build versus how to use can both take an entire career to learn both. Luckily, with half of that equation, it's already solved, right? Now it's just about how do we use them. And that's a part of the actual deployment, is teaching, that knowledge transfer of saying, hey, this is how we build it. You don't need to know how to code. You don't need to know all these things, but this is what we built. This is why we built it. This is why you should use it. And this is what it's used for. So being able to have that knowledge transfer, it's integral, and because you want to relieve some of your security pressures by hiring either Armor or Henson or a combination of both. But you don't want to give the keys to the kingdom essentially and say, hey, you manage my entire security stack. I don't want anything to do with it. You want to have enough experience within your team to say, okay, they're managing this piece, we're managing this piece. How do we come together to make sure that everything is protected at all times and I can sleep at night? I'm sure as a CISO, a lot of them lose a lot of sleep on it, whether or not they're protected, right? So, in terms of costs, protection, security, holistic approaches, hands down the best way to go about it. And then next one. All right, so it's XDR plus SOC. Ooh, there we go. What is XDR plus SOC and why is it right for you? XDR plus SOC, again, it's the enablement of your team to not only utilize Sentinel, we will craft it for you. We'll set it up in a way that makes sure that you're not leaving out any information, and it's data, as data is the new frontier. It is the new place that we need to make sure we're protecting, as well as, aggregating into one kind of aspect where we can see it all, right? The visibility aspect of it. And with that ability, why would this service or offering be right for you? It really boils down to, do you have the experience and capabilities to run everything and do everything? No? Okay, well, you're going to need at least the XDR part. After that, it's, okay, the people who built this and who run this and who do this on a daily basis, why not hire them as your security provider? Why not ask them to also go further and enrich your environment on a continual basis upon support requests or just changes in Microsoft that automatically happen? It's almost a no-brainer in that sense. It's kind of like if you go to get your car washed, they do oil changes next door. Why not go to the same place, right? No, why not do the whole thing? It doesn't make sense to go across town to do the oil change after that. So one thing I will say, and this is a friend of mine told me this, and this is a closing statement. Microsoft it's like a Lego, right? It's like a NASA level of Legos. They'll give you a box of 3 million pieces that say, "Hey, this is a fully functional and flyable Millennium Falcon. You can get into the cockpit and fly this." So here's the box. Now go build it without any instructions. So Armor, what we do, we come in, we have these instructions, and not only that, we'll be your co-pilot, and we'll make sure that this thing is flying smoothly and it's fully tested, and we're good to go. We'll fly wherever we need to do in our adventures. So that's it. That's all I got. And off to Chris.
All right, thanks everybody. So my name is Chris Savage. I'm the CTO here at the Henson Group. And I'm going to talk to you today more about modern workplace security and why that's important. So Microsoft 365 and all of the applications that it encompasses. So when we think about how to secure M365, and this kind of applies across the board to any of the Microsoft services, we want to think about the zero trust concept. And this means that we're going to verify everyone's identity explicitly. We're going to make sure that you only need and only get the access that you need. And then we're going to assume that we could have a breach. And so we're going to limit all of your activities across the platform and log everything so that if something does happen, we're able to capture all of the details about what's going on in the environment. Next slide. One way to look at your environment in M365 is the Microsoft Secure Score. This is a great way to look at a snapshot of how well you're doing on security, and especially your identity. It gives you quick reads into what's going on in the environment from a security perspective based on Microsoft's best practices. It's easy to understand. In some ways, some of the easy wins, if you will, to up your security score. And I like to focus when I'm working with clients on the identity secure score. That moat of protection is most important and the most critical piece, I think, of ensuring that you can do as much as you can from protecting outsiders from getting access to your environment. Next slide. When we look at secure score evaluations, these are all of the applications that the secure score is going to take a look at. Everything from app governance, Entra ID, any kind of external programs that might be associated with your enterprise account. It'll take a look at all of these things and come up with ways for you to improve each and every one of these applications so that they're performing well but performing securely in the environment. And it'll provide recommendations, especially for Entra ID and for Teams and more of the Microsoft products, very specific things that you can go do. The Secure Score panel also has the ability to immediately remediate some of these activities so that you're not kind of lost as to what you should, how to go about remediating things and improving your secure score. Next slide. So when you think about remediations, again, I like to focus on identity protection, things like privileged identity management, conditional access policies, anything that you can do to enhance the security of your identities in M365 is absolutely critical. And then I would focus on email security recommendations, anything that it says that you should be doing around email security, things like sender intelligence, domain reputation, content filtering, and post-delivery protection. So this would be things like the Safe Links product included with the Defender Online, the name of it escapes me right now, but the file protection service where it scans the file, it opens the file up to see if it's malicious or not. All of those things will prevent quite a bit of malicious activity in your environment through the email security pathway. Next slide. So we think about next then Entra ID. This is, it used to be called Microsoft Azure Active Directory. They renamed it a few months ago, last year at some point. But Entra ID is really a new platform that Microsoft is looking at and extending out, and modernizing the authentication process. Looking at how to sync on-prem IDs using the Entra Connect product. Allows you to maintain, both your on-prem Active Directory and syncing IDs with Entra ID. Next slide. Probably the most important thing anyone can do to secure your modern workplace environment is implement multi-factor authentication. Microsoft has reviewed a lot of cases where their customers have not had MFA on any of their accounts, and bad things happen very quickly to people that aren't turning on MFA. And this is MFA for everyone, not just for IT guys that have global admin access to your M365 environment. Really everyone in the organization should be using this, because anyone's account could be compromised in your organization, and if it is compromised, bad things will happen. So we always want to start with MFA as our number one protection against identity maliciousness, if you will. And then we can move on to conditional access policies. I really like conditional access policies. It's a way for us to isolate and ensure and validate that the source of the login ID is what we want it to be. So when you set up a conditional access policy, you should look at including groups and users, figuring out if it's your computer, like if it's an Entra ID joined computer or not. You want to make sure that you have that type of control set up in your environment. You want to determine if it's an IP location that you approve or not. Conditional access policies are great because you can set up an IP range that only your users would generally come from. This could be your home office. This could be some of your other offices for virtual and work from home employees. This could be a Azure virtual desktop environment that is set up and has dedicated IPs set to that. So there's ways for you to, even with all of the remote workers, leverage the conditional access policies, especially with IP location information. When you do that, so that's the signal part of. I'm gonna go back. There we go. The decision though is now: do we grant access or not grant access? This is the multi-step process of the conditional access policy. It can grant access using either full access, or if it sees that there's sort of you're here but we're not sure, so we're going to grant you partial access until you verify with things like MFA or making sure your device is compliant. There are options within conditional access that you can do. And then the enforcement is we want people only to log in from our machines. Well, we could do that then with a conditional access policy, or we want them to only log in from our machines that are also connected to this IP address range and have these applications installed on them, including some sort of anti-malware package. All of those things can be incorporated into a conditional access policy that helps really lock down your environment and your users' ability to be hacked. Next slide. Security defaults in Entra ID. If you do one thing with your Entra ID, turn these on. This means that all users will get that MFA requirement. Administrators will also be required to do MFA every time they do an administrative function. Blocking legacy authentication protocols. So these are all the insecure things that sit out there in SSL v1, those types of encryption and whatnot. And then protecting privileged activities like access to the Azure portal. All of those things are incorporated in the security default. So if you're new to securing your M365 environment, this is an easy way to implement a pretty strong security posture. It's not the strongest, but it'll eliminate quite a bit of security issues for yourselves going forward. Next slide. Privileged identity management is a way to give your IT staff the roles that they need to perform activities in M365 from a management perspective. Using PIM is a great way to not only know who is needing that type of access, limiting that type of access, and limiting it to certain times. You can create PIM roles that are open for a very short amount of time, especially for doing things like adding new users. Any of those things can be set up so that your privileged identity management is very time limited when it comes to performing those activities. PIM can also help enforce multi-factor authentication so that if you want to activate your role, you have to re-authenticate with your MFA. Using justification to understand why your users are activating. This is a great governance and control option. So if you have users that are doing a lot of admin activities, I encourage you to, if you're using PIM, have them put in detailed notes about what they're doing. That way you can track this and there's a log of everything that they're doing in the privileged role. You can get notifications when privileged roles are activated. This is important. So, if a administrator is compromised or a role is elevated that shouldn't be, you can be notified of it quickly. And then if it is unauthorized, you can jump on it and terminate those connections, terminate that user, and so forth. The conduction of access reviews. This is something that we do internally here at the Henson Group every 30 days. All of our privileged identities go through a review that myself and our Director of Managed Service Operations takes a look at. And we ensure that only the people that need access and these roles have it. And I encourage anyone that has an M365 environment run through this, because it's really important to ensure that you don't get administrative bloat, users that got added for, oh, I need to do this one thing, elevate me for a little bit, and then you forget that they're there. Well, this prevents all of that, because you have to go through and validate that those users still need that type of access. The other thing that the access review will do is, if that user hasn't elevated their privileges in that the review period, so the last 30 days or last 60 days, whatever your period is, it will make a recommendation that you just take them out of the privileged role, which is great, because then you can see if your admins are working the way you want them to, or if they need to be modified in any way. Next slide. If we're looking at my Entra ID governance, the governance is a set of tools that Microsoft provides that allows you to enhance and simplify your ID management. So lifecycle workflows allow you to automate the 3 easy processes of joiner, mover, and leaver. So new accounts, people that are changing roles, need changes in roles and responsibilities within your Entra ID environment, or people that are leaving your environment. Again, access reviews, just talked about those. They'll enable efficient management of group membership. You can use access reviews for not just privileged identities, but let's say your marketing team, changes, or your customer service team changes a lot, and they have very specific roles and functions within your M365 environment. Say they get access to specific SharePoint sites, that kind of thing. Well, you can leverage all of those access reviews within that type of a permission set to ensure that only those users can still see the files and folders and documents that they need to within your M365 environment. And then access packages are a new thing for Entra ID that allow you to take all of the different components of a user experience and what requires different permissions, bundle them up into a single package. So you can assign a user an access package that already has the roles, the group membership, the teams, etc. So, instead of submitting the ticket saying, hey, we need a new user that looks just like Joe from accounting, you can just say, hey, we have now a package for our accounting team. Assign that package to anyone joining as an accounting on the accounting team. If we think about good ways to, and the products that Microsoft offers to help us manage security within M365, Defender for Office is that product. It's got the email protection integrated into it. It's leveraging AI and automation. So all of the XDR signals that you get from all of the different aspects of the Office 365 environment come into Defender and allow you to kind of monitor all of those. Email and collaboration signals in 365 Defender can help advance or combat rather those advanced attacks. And the great thing is too, you can take all of the signals from Defender for Office 365, pull them into your Azure Sentinel as well. There's a connector built for this, and that way, as Caleb talked about, you can get an even broader and more refined signal database, if you will, of what's going on in your environment. So you may see something on Entra ID happening that's fishy, and then that gets correlated to somebody trying to log into a VM. So through Azure Sentinel and combining what you see in Azure with what you see in your M365 environment, you get all of those signals then correlated into one easy to use platform within Azure Sentinel. So as we talked about earlier, so how does this integrate with Armor? I mentioned the Sentinel managed by Armor. All of the Defender signals get incorporated into Azure Microsoft Sentinel. Defender for Identity is another package that Microsoft has. All of those logs can be pulled into Azure Sentinel. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is the de facto and default package for malware on your endpoints, and all of those signals can be imported into Sentinel as well. And then your cloud apps, if you've got the Defender for Cloud Apps deployed, those signals can then be pulled into Azure Sentinel, and Armor can create packages of monitoring and alerts based on all of those different signals that are coming in from those different platforms. And then the way that works with us is they find all of the funny things going on, they let us know, and we help you remediate them. That's where the partnership comes in. Next slide. So why choose Armor and the Henson Group? Well, I think Caleb really demonstrated that Armor has the ability to excel in remediating and finding and preventing any kind of threat in your environment. We are the experts in Microsoft Azure Modern Workplace. We have a managed services team that is well experienced in supporting customers in numerous industries across numerous continents. So our team is global, and so are our partners and customers. So we can handle pretty much any kind of support that you might require in Azure and Modern Workplace. Our defined service integrations between the two companies, Armor again handles all of those security pieces We handle all of that remediation and any kind of hands-on keyboard that are required to prevent any further activities from happening maliciously in your environment. And we've got monitoring tools that help us out with your environment. So all those things we can do for you. Next slide. And that wraps up our M365 security talk. Are there any questions out there? Whoop. Camera went bad white balance.
There are. We got a couple questions coming. Go ahead. Go ahead, Alexis.
Yeah, I had a quick question, and this might be for Chris or Caleb, but I'm curious, just, you know, with your experience overall and working with customers, I'm curious, you know, what security issues you've seen that were easily avoided. You know, and thinking about the best practices that you guys have been talking about, but just kind of curious what you've seen out there.
Oh, I've got some examples. Caleb, you want to?
Yeah, take a whack at it. We'll take turns.
All right. So we've had a couple of customers that have had this same problem. They've had their Azure environments compromised, which led to crypto mining within their Azure subscription. And it turns out that had they enabled MFA, like I talked about, the key piece of security protection within the Microsoft world, had they implemented MFA, they probably would not have ever been hacked. But those hacks led to, in one instance, $250,000 in Azure charges over a 1 week period. The other was over a weekend, it was $125,000. So, real world penalties happen if you're not securing your environment. And both of those companies got stuck with that bill. And Microsoft was very adamant that they had to pay it because they've been told you have to secure your environment with MFA, especially if you've got RBAC roles assigned as owner or contributor that allow somebody to log in and make changes to your Azure environment. So that's one real world example. Caleb?
Yeah, so one that I've seen that kind of always stands out to me is that, again, being able to see the landscape of an attack is so important, and I can't stress that enough, because kind of like what Chris was saying, they didn't have MFA or something like that, so via an email phishing link, somebody gets credentials. With a client specifically, what happened is that they clicked a phishing link, got credentials, were able to get access to the user's account, and even though it was stopped there, they didn't have visibility into the persistence of the actual threat actor. So what had happened is that, okay, cool, that was stopped, in some capacity at the MFA piece or at the piece right after, and the user had gone and created a new user on top of that and established persistence. And because they weren't able to see the activity in their Active Directory past that, it allowed for that user to establish persistence, wait, and then eventually get the ability to pivot to their AWS environment and get into their development and steal IP. So a lot of the times, again, what we see is that the visibility of the environment isn't fully there or fully fleshed out, and you can't always protect every single asset. It's just it's a continuous process always. But what you can do is see where your assets aren't protected and have more of a magnifying glass on those. So
yeah, that's a great example, and I run into so many clients that don't have logging turned on, especially just turning on Entra ID logging and maintaining those logs for more than 30 days. I think is real important, because to your point, you get threat actors that do something and then sit on it for 30, 60, 90 days just because they are wanting to make sure that what they do here doesn't get detected, and then they wait a little bit and then they pop up again and do some bad things.
Yeah, let's take the next question. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah, I was just gonna say there was one question that I got on another portal here, if you want to, about pricing. So
Yeah, yeah.
How
So
expensive is it to implement good security practices in Azure or modern workplace?
go first.
I'll drop in for this. MFA is free. So Microsoft does that. You can turn on MFA for all of your users instantly, and it doesn't cost you anything. The next level up from MFA is the Azure or Entra ID P1 and P2 licenses. Both of those allow you to begin development of those conditional access policies. And those are fairly inexpensive. And those can be targeted to those individuals that are identified as kind of key contributors in your environment. So your administrators, your high-level CEOs, people on your board, those, high profile or, just high access levels. Those are the people that you can get those P1 and P2 licenses for, create some of those conditional access policies, and help lock down some of that, privileged identity management.
Yeah, just to add on to that, good security in Azure is going to cost you, relative to the size of your company and what you're doing, I don't know, half of your budget typically. Great security though is what we strive for, and that's going to cost you most of your budget. That's really where it comes in, because that's including SOC, that's including protection, that's including visibility. Now, if you want to go above and beyond, it might go above your budget, but again, your budget's shattered whenever you're compromised. So it's really on how you want to do it. But great is where we want to be, definitely.
All right, we got another question. What should I do if I suspect I have an intrusion?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, again, if you have an intrusion without a SOC service like Armor or Henson, begin with where it typically always starts, which is either email or Active Directory. That's usually always where it begins. And then try and follow that trail. See how much you can uncover, and from there begin to start putting applications and security controls in place that prevent exfiltration and access packages, kind of like what Chris was talking about, which kind of looks at what's going on in your environment, who has access to what, and then you can actually take KQL and provide a really in-depth view of who has access, how they have access, and what areas you need to start paying attention to. Because if you think you're popped, probably are, right? Always assume breach.
Yeah, and I would agree with all of that. I would also say that, if you've got Azure, you want to turn on budget alerts. Some of what I described with those companies that were exfiltrated and and their Azure expense ran up. Had they had budgets turned on, they would have been able to see something bad was going on in their environment rather quickly. So that's another way that you can actually monitor for an intrusion that's a signal that's not necessarily directly related to someone compromising an identity. Other areas, look at those logs, keep those logs handy, and have alerts set up in the logs that allow you to be alerted when someone raises their privileged identity up to owner rights in your Azure world, or the global admin role in your M365 world.
Looks like 2 more questions just came in.
Yeah, so how can a company monitor their security in modern work or Azure? I think we kind of covered that a little bit, but obviously Azure Sentinel takes in all of the signals from both modern workplace and Microsoft Azure, so that you can pull in and help correlate those activities. Additionally, like I said, you can pull together different logs. Make sure you have logging turned on in your environment. Too many customers do not do this. Yes, it's an added expense, but if and when something happens, it's not really an if, it's really a when something happens, you'll have some of the data, at least a bare minimum of data that you would need to try and figure out what's going on in the environment.
Yeah, one thing that I don't no, I don't think was mentioned is Microsoft. Microsoft has a threat and vulnerability management piece for MDE, and being able to understand preemptively where you can be in trouble, right, with security and working with Secure Score and threat and vulnerability management, instead of looking at security after it's already happened, it allows for you to look at security before it happens. So having that aspect of it in both sides is extremely important. So that as well.
All right. Any other questions out there?
So let's mention some funding opportunities as well before we close out. As the Chief Marketing Director, I wouldn't do my job if I didn't chime in here, but I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today and coming on. Chris, Caleb, if you want to put your emails in the chat here so everybody can reach out to you directly with any questions, that would be great. We will follow up with an email for attending, as well as a recording for anybody who missed today's webinar, and we'll make sure that we get those assets out to you. If you have any questions, you can reach out to anyone here at the Henson Group team and or Caleb and the Armor team. Everybody's off of mute, so if anybody wants to chime in and have a question, you can unmute as well. Throw it in the chat before we close out. All right, what do you say, Chris? Caleb, nice job.
Thank you very much.
Give a big round of applause.
Appreciate everybody's
Thank you, everybody.
Participation today. And again, if you have questions or anything, my email's in chat. Caleb's is in chat. Feel free to shoot us an email. We will happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Bye.
bye now.